The ashes were still warm when Einar understood that grief was a luxury he could no longer afford. Dawn did not rise over Hrafnvik. It revealed it. Charred beams jutted toward the pale sky like broken ribs of a fallen beast. Smoke drifted low across the frozen shoreline, refusing to rise, as if even the air did not wish to carry what had happened here. Einar stood alone in the ruins of the longhouse, not kneeling, not weeping, standing. His mother's final breath still echoed somewhere inside him, but the sound no longer shattered him. It sharpened him. His father knew. The thought moved like a blade beneath his skin. He closed his eyes and saw it again. Not the fire, not the screams, but his father's face weeks before the attack. Quiet, watchful, measuring the horizon as if expecting something to emerge from it. Not fear, preparation. Einar inhaled slowly. The smoke burned his lungs, but he did not step back. Behind him, the 6 survivors moved like ghosts among the ruins, gathering what little remained. No one spoke loudly. Even grief seemed afraid. Torvald watched him from a distance. The old warrior's posture was rigid, but his eyes were uncertain, not because he doubted Einar's courage, because he did not yet know what Einar would become. A gust of wind shifted the ash at Einar's feet, revealing blackened fragments of the carved pillar that once bore his family's sigil. The raven split in 2, broken, unfinished. Einar knelt then, not in sorrow, but in observation. He touched the fractured wood. The Veiled had offered him escape, a new name, a quiet disappearance, survival without legacy. They believed erasure was mercy. They believed blood could be corrected through silence. His jaw tightened. They were wrong, but rage would not defeat them. Rage was predictable. Rage was what they expected. He had seen the scarred field leader's eyes on the shore, not angry, not cruel, assessing, weighing, testing. They had not killed him because they did not fear him. Not yet. The realization settled into his bones with terrifying clarity. If he hunted them now, he would die. If he sought revenge now, he would fulfill their judgment. Unstable, impulsive, proof of their prophecy. Einar rose slowly, brushing ash from his palms. This was not the moment to strike. This was the moment to transform. The sea before him was gray and endless. Somewhere beyond it, the order that destroyed his bloodline continued its quiet governance of the world. Ancient, organized, patient. His father had known they were coming, which meant his father had prepared for something beyond survival. Einar's gaze shifted toward the surviving villagers. A child clung to her older brother near the shoreline. An old woman sifted through debris with trembling hands. Torvald finally stepped closer, studying him carefully. They were not warriors. They were responsibility. And responsibility required strength greater than vengeance. Einar felt something inside him settle, not a fire, but a weight. Purpose did not roar. It anchored. He looked once more at the remains of the raven sigil. "My blood is not unstable," he whispered, barely audible against the wind. "It is unfinished." The words were not a vow shouted to the sky. They were a decision made inwardly, a line crossed without ceremony. He would not chase the Veiled blindly. He would not scream his grief into the ocean. He would become something they could not predict. Stronger, smarter, patient. If they believed time favored them, he would master time itself. Torvald finally reached him. "What now?" the older warrior asked quietly. Einar did not answer immediately. He looked at the ruins of his home one last time, not as a son mourning what was lost, but as a witness memorizing what must never happen again. Then he turned toward the survivors. "We rebuild," he said, but inside, something far more dangerous had already begun. They did not rebuild Hrafnvik, not truly. What they raised over the following days were not homes. They were shelters against wind and memory. The village remained a scar along the coastline, blackened earth, refusing to forget. Einar made no attempt to erase it. The ruins stood untouched at the center, a grave no one would disturb. Let it remain visible, he decided. Let it remind them. Torvald organized the survivors with quiet authority, but every decision passed through Einar first, not because he demanded it, because they waited for it. The shift unsettled him more than the fire had. Leadership was no longer inheritance, it was expectation. On the fourth night, after the burning, the wind carried a distant howl across the cliffs. The youngest survivor startled. Torvald reached instinctively for his axe. Einar did not move. "They are not wolves," he said softly. Torvald studied him. "You think they watch us still?" "I know they do." The Veiled had not needed to leave spies behind. Fear itself was their observer. Every shadow stretched longer. Every unfamiliar sound lingered too long in the ear. But Einar refused to let paranoia rule him. Observation required calm. That night, after the others slept, he walked alone to the highest ridge overlooking the sea. The cold bit through his cloak, but he welcomed it. Discomfort clarified thought. His father's final months replayed in fragments. Long absences, private conversations with traders, maps unrolled late at night, not of neighboring clans, of distant territories. His father had not been preparing for war. He had been preparing for disappearance, or exile, or something worse. Einar knelt in the frost and traced invisible lines across the ground. If the Veiled erased bloodlines to prevent chaos, then somewhere in the past his ancestors had caused it. What had they done? What power did his lineage threaten? The questions did not enrage him. They steadied him. Understanding was a weapon sharper than steel. Behind him, boots pressed lightly into snow. "Torvald, you do not sleep," the old warrior observed. "Neither do you." Torvald stepped beside him, following his gaze toward the horizon. "You plan," Torvald said. Einar did not deny it. "If they believe my blood carries danger," he replied, "then I must know why. And if the answer condemns your father?" The question struck deeper than Torvald intended. Einar felt it, but he did not flinch. "Then I will carry that truth," he said, "not hide from it." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Torvald studied him carefully. "You are not hunting them." "Not yet." "That restraint will save you," Torvald said quietly. "Or destroy you." Einar almost smiled. Both, perhaps. A faint glimmer flickered on the water below. Distant, brief, not fire. Metal catching moonlight. Einar saw it. So did Torvald. Neither spoke. A single vessel anchored far beyond the shallows, too far for fishing, too still for trade. The Veiled did not need proximity. They needed sight. Torvald's grip tightened on his axe. "We can strike it before dawn." "No." The word came without hesitation. "If we attack, they learn our limits," Einar said. "If we wait, we learn theirs." Torvald exhaled slowly. "You are 17. and they think that is weakness. The distant glimmer vanished as a cloud crossed the moon, but the presence remained, watching, measuring, testing patience. Einar felt the weight of their gaze like a hand at his back, not pushing, not restraining, waiting. Good, he thought. Let them watch. Let them believe I am still deciding who I am. He rose, turning away from the ridge. The cold no longer felt sharp. It felt clarifying. They burned a boy, he said quietly. Torvald looked at him, searching for anger. He found none. They will not meet him again. Far below, waves broke against the blackened shore, and somewhere in the darkness beyond sight, unseen eyes adjusted, recalculating what they thought they understood. The vessel was gone by morning, no sail on the horizon, no imprint along the shore. But absence did not mean retreat, it meant patience. Einar stood at the water's edge as pale light spilled across the sea. The tide carried fragments of charred wood back toward land as if returning what had been taken, or reminding him. Torvald approached silently. They moved before dawn, the old warrior said. No oars heard, no wake left behind. They wanted us to see them, Einar replied. Torvald's brow tightened. A warning? A measurement? Einar crouched near the shoreline, examining the damp sand. There, faint, nearly erased by the tide, the outline of a narrow keel dragged briefly against the shore during the night. Not long enough to unload men, long enough to observe. He studied the direction of the mark, north, not toward known trading routes, toward deeper waters, toward isolation. They're not hiding, Einar murmured. They are mapping us. Torvald crossed his arms. Then we must grow beyond their map. The words lingered. Grow beyond their map. Einar straightened slowly. Yes. That afternoon, he gathered the 6 survivors near the skeletal remains of the longhouse. No raised platform, no ceremonial authority. Just scorched earth beneath their boots. The youngest boy avoided his gaze. The old woman clutched a woven pouch to her chest. Fear was no longer loud. It was constant. Einar did not speak of revenge. He did not promise retribution. We leave in 3 days, he said calmly. A ripple of unease spread. Leave? One of the men whispered. This is our home. It was, Einar answered. Now it is a mark. He turned slowly, letting them see the ruin around them. They will return, not to kill us, to measure what we become. The words felt strange in his mouth, not born of instinct, but of thought sharpened over sleepless nights. If we remain, he continued, we remain predictable. Torvald watched him closely, saying nothing. And where do we go? The older woman asked. Einar's gaze shifted toward the inland forests rising beyond the cliffs, to places not drawn on their maps. He did not explain further, not yet. That night, he sat alone beside the extinguished hearthstone of his home. In the dirt before him lay his father's sayax, recovered from the ruins, its blade blackened but intact. He had not worn it since the burning. Now he picked it up. The weight felt different, not inherited, chosen. He ran a cloth slowly along the blade, clearing soot. The steel beneath reflected faint firelight. His father had taught him that steel remembered its shaping, heat, pressure, hammer. Without them, it remained brittle. Einar stared into the metal. They had applied fire. Now came shaping. A memory surfaced, one nearly forgotten. When he was younger, his father once spoke of an inland monastery abandoned decades ago after conflict with northern warbands. Not destroyed, vacated, its stone walls still standing, hidden within dense forest and steep ravines. Few traders traveled near it, few scouts would bother. Isolation without exposure. Einar's breath slowed. A place to rebuild without being studied, a place to train without interruption, a place where weakness could be burned away quietly. Footsteps approached again. Torvald. "You have chosen," the old warrior said. "Yes." "Not the sea?" "No, the sea is watched." Torvald nodded slowly. "And the forest?" "The forest does not report to anyone." A long pause. "You plan to harden them," Torvald observed. "I plan to harden myself," Einar corrected. Torvald studied him carefully. "There is a difference between strength and coldness." Einar's gaze did not waver. "I will learn that difference." Wind moved through the ruins behind them, carrying faint embers back into the night. Torvald placed a hand briefly on Einar's shoulder. "Then we leave at dawn on the third day." Einar nodded. But as Torvald walked away, Einar remained still. He looked down at the cleaned blade in his hands. Not as a weapon, as a symbol. The boy who had sworn vengeance on the shore was gone. In his place stood something quieter, something forming. And far beyond the coastline, hidden within deeper waters, another vessel turned slightly south, adjusting its course, not retreating, following. They left before sunrise on the third day. No ceremony, no farewell. Hrafnvik did not deserve a goodbye. It demanded memory. Einar walked at the front, not as a symbol of authority, but as the first to face whatever waited beyond the tree line. Torvald followed at the rear, guarding their silence. Between them moved the fragile remnants of a bloodline that had been marked for extinction. The forest swallowed them quickly. Branches interlocked overhead, muting the sky. Snow clung to pine needles in heavy silence. The air smelled of damp earth and old bark, untouched, indifferent. Good! Indifference was safer than attention. They traveled without banners, without fire during daylight, without speaking unless necessary. Every snapped twig felt deliberate, every shadow felt observed, not by wolves, by memory. Einar felt the weight of watchfulness even here. The veiled were not merely men on ships. They were structure, information, patience woven across regions. If they had erased Hrafnvik so precisely, they would not ignore his disappearance, which meant time was limited. By the second night, exhaustion thinned the survivors' composure. The youngest boy stumbled repeatedly. The old woman coughed into her sleeve, blood faint but present. Torvald noticed. Einar noticed. Weakness could not be denied, but neither could it be indulged. They camped within a natural hollow between steep ravines. Stone walls curved protectively around them. No fire, cold instead. Einar stood apart as darkness thickened. His thoughts no longer drifted to his mother's screams. They analyzed patterns. The veiled believed certain lineages destabilized the balance of power. Balance. The word disturbed him. Who defined it? Who decided which blood was dangerous? His father had prepared quietly, not by raising armies, but by studying maps. Knowledge had been his weapon. Then Einar understood something sharper. The veiled were not afraid of swords. They were afraid of influence, of legacy spreading beyond control. That meant survival alone was not enough. To defeat them, he would need more than strength. He would need reach. A branch cracked somewhere beyond the ravine. Torvald's hand moved instantly to his axe. Einar did not turn. "Deer," he said quietly. Torvald listened. A pause, then the faint rhythm of retreating hooves. "You hear differently now," Torvald murmured. "I listen differently." The correction was subtle, intentional. Later that night, as frost formed along their cloaks, Einar walked the perimeter alone. He tested the terrain, counted paces, measured angles of approach. The monastery his father once described should lie another day's march north, hidden beyond a river bend and steep incline. Stone walls meant defensibility. Abandoned halls meant space for shaping. He paused at the edge of the ravine and looked back toward the south, toward the coast, toward what remained of his childhood. The grief was still there, but it no longer commanded him. It fueled something colder, more disciplined. If the Veiled were watching, they would expect despair or reckless retaliation. Instead, he would vanish into terrain not easily surveyed. He would learn, train, expand quietly, and when he emerged again, it would not be as prey reacting to hunters. It would be as something undefined, unpredictable. Torvald approached softly once more. "You are not sleeping," the old warrior said. "Not yet." Torvald studied his expression in the dim starlight. "You are building walls inside yourself." "Yes. Be careful, they do not trap you." Einar's gaze remained fixed on the darkness beyond. "Walls can be opened from within," he replied. Torvald did not argue. The wind shifted slightly, carrying no scent of sea, no salt, no smoke. For the first time since the burning, Einar felt distance from the Veiled's immediate shadow. But distance was not safety. It was preparation. As dawn approached, he finally allowed himself to sit against the cold stone of the ravine, not to rest, to think. The boy who had once sought his father's approval was dissolving. In his place, something structured was forming, not rage, not sorrow, design. And somewhere far behind them, far beyond the forest's reach, a rider paused along a coastal cliff, scanning inland with quiet calculation before turning his horse north. The monastery revealed itself not with grandeur, but with silence. By midday of the fourth day, the forest thinned along a steep incline of stone and tangled roots. Einar reached the crest first and stopped. Below them, half embraced by the mountain's curve, stood the structure his father once described. Weathered stone walls rose from the earth like something unfinished by time. The wooden gates had long rotted away, leaving only iron hinges clinging stubbornly to their frames. Moss crawled along the outer walls, and narrow windows stared outward like hollow eyes. No banners, no smoke, no movement. Torvald stepped beside him, studying the site. "Monks built this?" he murmured. "Yes." "For prayer? For solitude?" Torvald exhaled quietly. "Solitude is dangerous. So is noise." They descended carefully. The courtyard was overgrown, but intact. Snow had gathered in corners untouched by sun. A cracked stone well stood at the center, its rope long gone, but its depth still dark and promising. Einar crossed the threshold without hesitation. Inside, the air was dry and still. Long corridors stretched in both directions, lined with small chambers. Wooden beams creaked faintly but held firm. At the far end, a larger hall opened beneath a collapsed section of roof. where pale light streamed down like a silent blessing, or exposure. He paused beneath the broken ceiling and looked upward. Open sky, a flaw, but also vision. Torvald circled slowly, testing the stability of pillars, examining entry points. "This can be defended," the old warrior said. "Easily," Einar nodded. "And hidden." The survivors entered hesitantly, their footsteps echoing through the abandoned halls. The young boy touched the stone wall as if expecting it to crumble. The old woman whispered something under her breath, not prayer, but memory. This place did not carry fire, it carried abandonment, which meant it carried possibility. Einar walked toward the far end of the hall where a raised platform once held an altar. The structure was gone, removed long ago, leaving only an elevated stone base. He stepped onto it slowly. From here, he could see every entrance, every shadow, every face. This was not a throne. It was vantage. Torvald watched him carefully. "You choose this," the old warrior said. "Yes, and what do we become here?" The question lingered in the cold air. Einar looked around the chamber at fragile survivors who had lost everything except breath. "We become harder to erase." There was no roar of agreement, no rallying cry, only quiet understanding. That night, for the first time since the burning, they lit a controlled fire inside the hall. Its glow flickered against ancient stone, casting long, shifting shadows that danced across the walls. Einar did not sit among them. He walked the perimeter again, studying structural weaknesses. One narrow passage along the northern wing led toward what appeared to be underground storage chambers. Defensive potential, limited access points, water source in the courtyard, elevation advantage, isolation. Yes, this would shape them. As the others settled near the fire, Torvald approached. "You intend to train them?" he said. "Yes. They are farmers, fishermen, children. They are survivors." Torvald studied him. "And you?" Einar looked toward the cracked roof where stars now shimmered faintly above. "I am unfinished." The word felt heavier here, not a declaration, an acceptance. He descended from the platform and moved toward the courtyard well. Snow crunched beneath his boots. He gripped the stone edge and peered into the darkness below. Depth, hidden water, reflection unseen. He removed his cloak and set it aside. Then, without ceremony, he drew his father's sayax and pressed the blade lightly against his palm, not to wound deeply, but enough to feel the sting. A reminder. Blood was not myth, it was choice. He closed his fist and let the sensation anchor him. No oath spoken, no witness called, only decision. Inside the hall, Torvald watched from the doorway, not interfering. The boy who once reacted had begun to design, and in the distant forest below the mountain, a lone rider dismounted briefly, kneeling to examine faint tracks in the snow before rising again, eyes narrowing toward the monastery's silhouette against the darkening sky. The first snow fell heavier that night. It covered their tracks. It softened the forest. It silenced the world. Einar stood in the center of the monastery courtyard as flakes gathered on his shoulders and hair. The sting in his palm had faded, but the awareness remained, steady, deliberate. Inside the hall, the survivors slept uneasily near the fire. Torvald alone remained awake, seated against a pillar, watching both entrances. They had found shelter, but shelter was not safety. Einar tilted his head slightly. There, faint, almost indistinguishable from wind-brushing pine needles. Movement beyond the outer wall, not clumsy, not animal, measured. He did not reach for his blade. Instead, he walked slowly toward the northern archway and stepped just outside the shadow of the wall. The forest stretched downward in pale darkness, empty, but not unoccupied. He could feel it, the same sensation from the ridge above Hrafnvik. Observation without interference, a test of patience. Good, let them see. He did not hide, he did not posture. He simply stood, exposed beneath falling snow, unguarded, unafraid. If the Veiled expected a frightened boy scrambling for survival, they would find none. If they expected reckless retaliation, they would find none. Instead, they would witness stillness, and stillness unsettles hunters more than movement. Minutes passed. The wind shifted. The presence receded slightly, and not retreating, but repositioning. Satisfied. For now. Einar turned back toward the courtyard well, snow gathered along its rim, slowly erasing footprints. Erasure. That was their weapon. Erase villages, erase bloodlines, erase memory. He would answer differently. He would carve permanence. Inside the hall, Torvald rose as Einar entered. "You felt it," the old warrior said quietly. "Yes." "They are closer." "Yes." Torvald searched his face for fear. He found none. "What do we do?" Einar walked past him and stepped once more onto the raised stone platform at the end of the hall. Firelight flickered behind him, casting his shadow long across ancient stone. "We become inevitable," he said. The words settled heavily in the chamber, not shouted, not dramatic, certain. Torvald studied him, and for the first time did not see a grieving son. He saw structure forming, direction, danger. Outside, beyond the forest's edge, the lone rider mounted his horse again. He lingered only a moment longer, committing the monastery's position to memory before turning south. The message would travel quietly. The boy had not broken, he had adapted. Snow continued to fall as night deepened around the monastery. Einar remained standing on the platform long after the fire dimmed and the others slept. He did not pray, he did not dream, he planned. And far away, in chambers unseen and older than any monastery stone, men who believed they controlled balance would soon learn something unsettling. The blood they tried to erase was not fading. It was consolidating. The boy who swore revenge was gone. In his place stood something far more patient. And patience, when sharpened, becomes destiny.